Okay. All right. Now, so this Self-Leadership Success Summit interview is a little bit different. I'm on the couch with Fredrik Haren. Fredrik Haren is a good friend of mine, but most people know him as the creativity guy. He's written a best-selling book on creativity called The Ideas Book, which we'll talk about. He is also a thought leader in the area of humanity to the power of ideas. Welcome, Fredrik.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. So since this is the Self-Leadership Success Summit, I have two questions. The first one, of course, is what is self-leadership to you?
Okay, so self-leadership to me is how you get things done. That's what it means.
Yeah, how you get things done. That is the most succinct definition. All right. And then the next question, of course, is success. For you, what does success mean to you?
For that one, I have an answer that I get this question from journalists sometimes. So I've been perfecting the answer. I'm quite happy with this one. So my definition of success is when everyone else thinks that you've made it, but you know that you're just getting started. And the reason I love this definition is that it shows that you've accomplished something that other people look at as being impressive or worthwhile, but you are not happy with this. You are looking at how can I get even further? How can I do even more? To me, success is a forward motion. It's going somewhere. It's not a destination. It's a journey.
I absolutely agree with that. And anybody who's studied martial arts knows, you get your black belt and then your sensei says, okay, now you just got started.
Yes.
And you think you've arrived somewhere, and then suddenly now you're serious about the journey.
Yes, and I also, maybe from that perspective, you can also ask that when you're really successful, you're not really successful until you are then teaching others or on how to achieve something similar or even better. So it's that giving back aspect has to be there for it to be successful.
Yeah, I think, if you're at the top of the mountain of success and you're on your own, it's a pretty lonely place,
yes.
Right? I mean, there's this concept of learning around unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. Conscious competence, you've worked out how to do it, but you have to pay attention. Unconscious competence, it comes naturally, which most people think is success. But that paying it forward, you're going to have to become conscious of your unconscious competence, right?
Yes, and you also have to look at what you're doing from a perspective larger than yourself.
Yeah, I love that, and that's your concept of humanity, the power of ideas.
Yes.
So can you share with what that's about?
Okay, I'll start by so this is like a personal slogan to me. I actually call it my inner theme, and I've made it. It's a bit of I would almost call it a gift.
Okay.
I help people find their inner theme, and an inner theme is I define it as it's like your personal slogan. It's the definition of what your life is all about. So I believe that every life is a story, and every story has a message. So if you can figure out what the message of your life is, you find clarity, you find purpose, you know what you're going to do, you know what you're not going to do. And in my case, my inner theme is humanity to the power of ideas. And that means that might not mean something for the people listening, but to me it means everything. It means I believe in the potential of humanity, I believe in the power of ideas, and I believe that if every human being would reach his or her full creative potential and learn and pick up ideas from other people around the world would be a much better place. And that is what an inner theme is. It's something that if you follow this theme, the world will be a better place. And I'm very passionate about helping other people find their own inner theme. I don't really think you can have self-leadership unless you first know what your inner theme is. Because if you not know where you're going, if you not know, then which way are you going to lead yourself?
Sure, absolutely, and that's the intentional part of self-leadership, the driving. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because the definition of self-leadership is the practice of, as you know, intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives.
Yes.
So if you're not intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling with your inner theme, with your purpose, with your passion, then your thinking and feeling is random and reactive to the world around you.
Yes.
So when did you get this self-awareness that this was your inner theme and this was driving you? When did you have this aha moment?
I wasn't really clear about how strong our inner theme could be until a couple of years ago. And I've been starting to help a lot of other speakers find, or just mentoring and teaching them. And then I realized that the number one thing that most speakers were lacking was a strong inner theme. They didn't have a core fundamental drive, and they were just, I speak on this, I speak on that, but they were speaking from a perspective of the topics they were speaking on, not like, why are you really doing this? What is the purpose of why you speak on this topic? So for the longest time, I wasn't really clear about my own inner theme, and it has evolved. So should I tell my story?
Sure.
Okay. So when I was 27 years old, I saw the internet, and I decided I was in university in America. I was writing my university thesis, and I said, this thing called the internet is going to become huge. So I went back to Sweden, and I wrote my thesis about the internet. It became a book. I became a speaker. So for about 5 years, I thought my thing was the internet. Then I sold my company, and in 2000, I sold my company, and I was like, okay, now what? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I realized that I wanted to continue to speak and write, but not necessarily on the internet. And I realized that what I actually had loved about the internet wasn't the internet itself, it was the fact that it was new, that you could do something new with the internet. So then I decided creativity is my thing. Mm-hmm. And for many, many years, I would speak and write only about creativity. And then about 10 years ago, I decided to move to China and then to Singapore. And then I realized that there was another thing that was driving me equally as much as creativity, and that was this whole thought about global mindset, human mindset. And that's what I loved about the internet, the fact that it was global, the fact that it connected humanity, the worldwide aspect of the internet. So then for the longest time I had two things. I spoke about the internet and I spoke about global. But when I was able to combine the two, then it became humanity to the power of ideas. And then suddenly everything was aligned. I was like, yeah, that is me 100%. That's why I love the internet, that's why I like creativity, that's why I travel so much, that everything I've been doing falls into that highway. And now I know this is who I am.
And that's the gift is knowing why you're on the planet and what you do.
And that's why I know that my next book will be called The World of Creativity, and that's why my next goal is to speak in 100 countries. Most speakers would not have that as a goal, but for me this is important. I want to have worked in more than half of the world's countries. For most people that might be an interesting goal, but for me it's an important goal. That's why I'm doing it.
Really, really powerfully intentional, and with that, self-awareness. So what I take from that is the iteration or the evolution of your self-awareness, right? Yeah. You're peeling back the layers. There's a first layer, it's new. The second layer, it's creativity. And then how does that creativity pay it forwards and transform people's lives, right? Mm. And so if you're watching this and you haven't yet found your inner theme, your purpose, etc., it's okay. It takes time, right?
Okay, it takes time, but on the other hand, most people have never sat down and consciously tried to do this. This is my observation. I would say 99% of people have no clue what their inner theme is, or think that they know, but they turn out to be wrong. I've done literally hundreds of inner theme sessions with people, and out of the hundreds I've done, there's less than a handful who, before they met me, were on target with their inner theme. Almost everyone has been off target. You are one of the few who's been on target.
Well, thank you. Although technically we never actually worked out what my inner theme is.
We haven't done the deeper sessions, but yeah. But you know very much what you stand for. You know what your theme is. You've been writing your books about it, doing the speeches on it, but also just from a perspective of what you're interested in. This is your thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also, but I got the iteration from my clients too. A couple of years ago, I did a brand exercise with one of our other guests for the Success Summit, which was Jerome Joseph, the brand guy. And we asked my clients what they thought about me. So sometimes, brand is not what you think about yourself, it's what other people think about you. And my clients, we interviewed 500 clients, and they came back and said, transformation, ownership, and impact. So not self-leadership,
right,
but the change that happens when you take the ownership for your own life, the self-leadership piece, and then the impact that then that makes. So I'm very clear. I mean, those are values, but they're also, very much guiding principles.
And it's interesting, and it's important to understand that inner theme is different from brand. So your brand can be something that you stand for this is what people think about when they think about you. Inner theme is what you think about when you think about yourself.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, the distinction between intentionality, which I would call inside out, versus brand, which is perhaps outside in, right?
And from a self-leadership perspective, a brand is much less important. That is what other people think about you. The much more important part is what you think of, not what you think about yourself, but what you stand for and who you really are.
Yeah.
When you go, so I define inner theme as it's like the metal plate that is, if you rip away everything and you go to the deepest core of yourself, and you find that place, you find a message, and it's kind of like a ball. You throw that ball, and it just rip away everything and just have that strong, fundamental part of yourself, and the message that is inside of you will now bounce much further away. So, and if you haven't dug away all the other soft tissue in front of it, the message will just kind of go like this. So, but when you find that core, it just magnifies like this. It becomes strong and unique.
So many people just don't have this self-awareness because they haven't done that work. You know? I'm trying to think about who it was that said, I think it was Henry Ford that said, working on yourself is the hardest work you do, which is why so few people do it.
It's true. And it's also interesting because I've done many of these inner theme sessions, and the person literally says the inner theme, and I go, there you go, you just said it, and they go, what did I say? I don't know, what did I say? So I do this analogy of cutting your own hair. It's finding your own inner theme is almost like cutting your own hair. You won't understand that, but
thanks for that one. I shave my head.
Which is okay. But the idea is like, it's much easier to help someone, at least for me, help someone else find their inner theme than it was for me to find my own. I mean, I help people find it in the fastest time was 26 minutes. Sat down with someone in 26 minutes. I found this person inner theme. For me, it took 9 months. Because it's just it's difficult to look into yourself because there's so much things covering it. Yeah.
Okay. So was this an intentional journey to find your inner theme, or was this just something that happened incidentally?
I think it started as a branding exercise, actually.
Yeah.
But then the more I did it, the more I went instead of looking from the outside, looking at the inside, and then doing it on other people made me develop the process much more.
Okay.
Right? And now, having done it with hundreds of people, I have the process down to I know exactly how to do it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So self-awareness, the very important part of the self-leadership theoretical model.
Yeah.
At the axle of self-leadership is context. Now, yours is in the context of speaking. You're a global speaker. You've stood on huge stages. What's your biggest audience?
400,000 people.
Not many people are going to be able to top that. All right, 400,000 people. That's a huge audience. So that's your context. That's your world. You're also an author, so you've got the domain of authorship. The criticism, or not, perhaps the pushback from somebody listening to this is, well, I'm not a speaker, I'm not a writer. Why is this inner theme? Why is this self-awareness important to me? Perhaps in another domain, another context.
Okay, but I have done inner theme sessions with not only speakers. I've done it with executives and a 27-year-old guy. So the oldest is 60 plus and the youngest is, I think, 25 or 23. So for speakers, it's crucial. If a speaker that hasn't found his or her inner theme, I would argue they shouldn't even be speakers. But for everyone, it's important to know what is if you don't want to think about inner, you can look at it as purpose. What's the purpose of my life? I like the analogy I do is like Lord of the Rings or any epic story. You have characters, and you these characters go through Harry Potter. They go through the whole story, and at the end, not only is it the end of the story, but there's a message in that story, right? There's a message in what that character went through. And I believe that we're 7.5 billion characters in this huge epic story being told. Yeah. And if we can find the message in what this character you are supposed to be doing, it what role you play in this story. If you are aware of that, of course this story, this character will become more profound, more important, more meaningful. Otherwise you're just what do you call it, an extra.
An extra.
Who wants to be an extra?
Yeah. Well, we know who's going to get killed off very early in a horror story. Right?
Exactly. You're the pawns, the extras.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that segues nicely into the self-regulation part of the self-leadership model, and a lot of the self-regulation is the narrative that you're telling yourself. You're in a dialogue. So you put this in a much broader concept. I mean, Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage." Everybody has their entrances and exits. Yeah. So finding that, if you know what your inner theme is, then what you're saying to yourself when stuff happens out in the world is you go, well, hang on a moment, I know who I am. So what's happening externally doesn't have to impact me as much, right? Because I know this is part of the story.
All the world is a stage, and all the humans are characters.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Well, good old Will Shakespeare.
Yeah, we just improved Shakespeare.
I don't think we did that. But having gone to an English grammar school and been forced to respect and revere Shakespeare, I couldn't go there. But anyway, no. I mean, Shakespeare understood it's all a narrative, it's all a story.
Yeah.
And again, all the characters have a purpose. And I mean, if you study Shakespeare, you know what's going to happen next. And to the point where if I watch any kind of serialized soap opera, you can actually see the Shakespearean characters coming out. Yeah. And I think in human people's lives as well. You see certain people in certain stages of life. As a coach, I get to see somebody, having particular, or almost repeating struggles. You can say where you are. Yeah. Did you find that with talking to people that there's certain patterns that emerge, or is it everybody unique?
My biggest revelations after doing these hundreds of inner theme sessions is, first of all, people are not aware what their inner theme is. Second of all, people don't understand what parts of their lives, what events in their life has been most profound for them. Sure. And also what those mean. And they also tend to overemphasize a few events in their life that might, especially negative events, they let one negative event define a big part of their life, which I think is very unfortunate. I'm not saying you should not pretend it didn't happen, but your life is much bigger than one event. Sure. And there's a lot of events, and then people are not good at looking at basically if you have 3 dots, you can now create a line, right?
Extrapolate.
You can extrapolate, but 2 lines is not enough, and people are very, very bad at putting all of those dots in their lives out, mapping them out, and then trying to find the red thread that goes through it. Most people are, and if you do that, that's when you find true clarity.
Yeah, well, that's a rationalization, though. I agree with you, but I want to take the converse viewpoint for a perspective. Steve Jobs in his commencement speech at Stanford talked about joining the dots backwards.
Right. Yeah.
So, human beings' capacity to create meaning out of anything, right? So sometimes, you can connect those dots and say, well, this is what it means. This is my purpose on life. I survived a car crash, therefore, my purpose on the life is this. Yeah. Right? Okay. I think to your point, that's not enough dots, right?
No, that's not enough dots. I'm not saying you need to overanalyze what happened. What I'm saying is that we are a result of everything that we have been doing up to now. Yeah. Of course, that doesn't mean that the rest of our life is now determined. It's the other way around. It's like you look at all the things that happened, just like in a story. All of these things happen to this character, but what's going to happen in the next chapter is not written. Not at all. We can totally define what that's going to be, but it's much easier to know what will happen. Basically, look at it as an author. It's much easier to know what's going to happen next in the story. As a writer, if you know what's happened before, if you just open a book and start reading it in the middle, there's no clue what's going to happen next. And as authors, we need to be aware of the backstory. Okay. It's very important when you write a book that you create a backstory about the characters. Who are these people? Why do they behave as they do? Then you can decide what are they going to do. And they can do huge things, like Frodo can go out and get the ring, right? But you need to know the backstory. And as humans, we need to be aware of our own backstory, and we need to know who we are before we can define who we're going to become. Most people don't know who they are.
That's incredibly profound, and I love what you say there. Is just because this is written up until now, the next chapter is completely open to you. And I mean that's the clear aspect of self-leadership, is that you're living your life.
Yeah.
You're not living somebody else's script, somebody else's life, or an event is writing your life for you. None of those matter.
I would even go further and saying it's easier to write the life you want to write if you are aware of what you have been going through before. Because if you are not, if you have been, it's like you've been walking in fog.
Yes.
If you're not aware of where you've been, you have been walking in, and if you walk in fog, there's very small chance you will end up where you want to be.
Yeah. That's the walking in fog is the metaphor my co-author of my 2012 self-leadership book, Dr. Anna Kazan, talks about. She talked about, she'd struggled with ADHD, and she said, until she found self-leadership, she was living her life in a fog.
Oh, there you go.
And so, it's a very strong metaphor. And since we've done Lord of the Rings and Frodo as great narratives, I think almost many people play these computer games. My teenage daughter plays these computer games, and you have to, before you can get to the next level, you've got to go find the sword or find the jewel or find this.
Yeah.
And then those allow you to step up to the next level. Yeah. So each of those events are resources, experience. You can't just write the next chapter of your life with no backstory, as you say, with no resources, with no experience.
Yeah.
The next chapter is written because of those things that have happened to us.
Yes.
So
totally agree.
Neither negative or bad. So we've talked a bit about the self-regulation. So if you've got the narrative, the inner theme, then that puts you in the right physiological state to do what you do. So whether that's enthusiasm or passion or optimism. So we've now got that the inner narrative. I think most people who meet you, see you as very positive, very upbeat and energetic. I've seen you in some up and down moments. So how do you regulate your emotional stability, your energy? How do you take control of that?
I would say that I am a very positive person, but I'm also a person. I wouldn't say self-doubt, but I how do I describe that?
Analyze, critique.
Yeah, okay. Self-analyze, self-critique. Yeah. When I talk about creativity, I say that to be creative, you have to be confident. You have to feel like, I don't care if everyone is going in this direction, I'm going to go in this direction. So to be creative, you have to be confident. But truly creative people are always, actually I would say self-doubt then. They are always unsure if the direction they have selected is the right one. So everyone is going in this direction, and you go, I'm going to go in this direction, and you go, well, maybe not, maybe this direction, maybe that direction, maybe this direction. So this idea of not being 100% sure about what you're doing is, I think, it's absolutely crucial. You need to say there might be a different way. So I'm actually, you know this. I have an identical twin, and when we were growing up, we would pick a topic, let's say nuclear power, and go for or against, and he would go against, I go for, and we would argue for 15 minutes about if we should have nuclear power or not. And then after 50 minutes we would switch, and we go, okay, now you argue against this. So it was a way for us to practice looking at things from a different perspective. And I always believe that you should look at things from a different perspective. So I do not believe in being absolutely sure about anything, including what you believe and what you think, and if you think you did something right. I call it thinking yellow. It's not black and white, it's rainbow. There are many different ways of doing something. And a lot of people are missing out on so many things because they say either I have to, it's like pest or cholera. I have to do this or I have to do this. Yeah. And then they go like, well, I don't know. Okay, I have to choose. And it's like, no. You have this. You have 100 options. You have 1,000 options. And if you automatically say, no, I have to choose between those two, or I have to do this. No, you don't have to do anything. You could do something else. One of my favorite things to look at life is that if this is my whole life philosophy. If I feel like I am banging my head against a door, I do not believe in banging my head against the door. If I feel that I'm banging my head against the door, I stop and I go to the next door. And if that door is locked, I go to the next one. If that door is unlocked but has to be opened, I go to the next. I go until I find an open door, and then I walk straight through the open door. My life is built around not avoiding stress and looking for opportunities. And most people are banging heads against the wall and suffering in their lives.
Oh yeah, you see that all the time, right? Well, that's really interesting. That the confidence to self-doubt. That's a really interesting way of
confidently doubting or doubtfully confident.
Well, that's a piece of self-reflection. But I love the way with your twin brother you're arguing. René Descartes gave us this concept of thesis and antithesis, right? That we need to argue. And in working with senior leaders, if they don't have the discipline about arguing against their own ideas, they don't get good. Yeah. And they get this cognitive bias that it must be a good idea. And it's very rare that people have got that strategic thinking and the ability to argue against their own ideas.
So I when it comes to self-leadership, I knew we were going to do this. I was actually thinking, okay, what is my self-leadership approach?
Yeah.
And a lot of people might not understand this about me, but I am extremely lazy. So they can be. I call this the work ethic of a lion, right? That this is my message about self-leadership, because lions, as you know, 20 hours per day, they don't do anything. They just enjoy life, play with their kids, lie under a tree. They just relax. 4 hours per day, they walk. They only walk for 4 hours per day. 2 hours per day they hunt. And when they hunt, only for a short period of time do they actually run. Most of their hunting is just lying in the grass and looking for the prey. Yeah. Because lions can only run 65 kilometers per hour and only for a few hundred meters. So they're kind of slow, and they don't have a good stamina. So when they actually decide to hunt, they have to be absolutely sure that they will get the prey. And I do the same thing. So for the most part, I don't do anything. Like today is a good day. So this morning I woke up, I went for a 1 hour walk, listened to a podcast. Then I decided to take a nap. Then I played with my daughter, and then I went here. So and I checked email for maybe 15 minutes. So for most of this day, I haven't done crap today. But when I decide that I am going to work, I am laser focused, and also I decide. For example, I said I need to get represented by more speaker bureaus. So in the last week, I made a very laser focused effort to contact which bureaus should I work with, and how am I going to contact them, and how do I want them to find out about me, and how instead of me contacting them. So in the last week, that's what I've done, and I signed 5 speaker bureaus in the last 3 days, and got 2 speaking engagement through this, which is just for, as a speaker, that's extremely valuable to be represented by speaker bureaus. There are tens of thousands of speakers, but very few represented by bureaus. And that's a perfect example of when you decide to do something, you do it all out, and you just focus on getting it done, and you make sure that the work you're putting down is going to be extremely valuable. So a lot of people, I call them, they're not lions, they're oxes. They spend all day, eating grass all day, 14 hours per day, eating grass, very little energy. They have to do it all the time, and their whole life is about eating grass. The lion rests under a tree for 20 hours per day, and then goes out, kills the buffalo, and eats a big meal, right? The key here is to be able to identify opportunities. This, if you ask me what is self-leadership, it's not waking up 5 in the morning, working 14 hours per day, and doing nothing else. To me, it's very important. Self-leadership is about finding the focus to do exactly the right thing to get maximum effect so that you can enjoy life to the fullest. If the end result of your self-leadership is not the life that you want, it is wasted.
Wow. You're not pulling your punches there.
Yeah.
No, beautiful. I think people really need to hear this. And this is the real the self-awareness to know what you're good at, so that you can go out, find that thing, chase it down, capture it like the lion.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you don't have to be a speaker to do this. I mean, for me, I have 4 months off every year, and I build my business so that when I work, in the 8 months that I work, I speak in 20 to 30 countries, and I make enough money so I can take 4 months off. But I don't care. If you're a salesperson, go out and sit in a cafe and walk in a park and then find who's the one person I should talk to get that big sales deal, and go get that sales deal. David Ogilvy, in his famous book, he talks about he went and watched a movie in the middle of the night, middle of the day, because he wanted to find some inspiration, and then boom, you have that idea, you go home, and that's the idea that gets the account. It doesn't matter who you are and what you do, it's about grasping opportunities.
Yeah, I think you've said that very succinctly, and I think culturally, we have this. Everybody's got this culture of being busy, right? How are you? Busy, right?
Yeah.
But there's good busy and there's bad busy. One of the self-leadership strategies I always share with executives that I'm coaching is you need to create a fake client, Mr. Black or Mr. White or whatever, and that person's a regular client that you have a meeting with every week. And you have to, it's a very important meeting, so you leave your mobile with your secretary or switch it off, and you go sit in a coffee shop with a blank notebook and a pencil, right? And people say, well, I'm too busy to do that. And I said, well, actually, that's going to give you much more time.
Yes.
I had a CEO, in fact, the very first CEO I coached, because you always remember your first, and one day he came into his boardroom, which was where I was meeting him, and he said, Andrew, I'm too busy to meet you today. And I was like, I've just driven across town to meet you. How can you cancel the appointment when you're in the room? He said, I'm too busy to meet you today, which is why I need to meet you today, because I'm so busy, I need, because an hour with you will get me 10 hours more of productivity. And he had that self-awareness.
Yeah.
So stop being busy, be effective.
And you're going to like this. You like all Greek and,
Yes.
and Romans. You're what do you call it? Classically educated.
Yeah, I am.
Yes. So do you know the meaning of the word opportunity?
I do, because you've told
I
it to
told
me.
you before, so I'm going to tell you. I'm fascinated by etymology. Hey, by the way, do you know what etymology means?
Well, I know.
What is the etymology of the word etymology?
Well, why is phonetic not spelled phonetically?
The etymology of the word etymology is truth,
Yes.
meaning the true meaning of a word. And the etymology of the word opportunity is that in the old Roman times, it's actually the name of a wind. You have a typhoon, you have a storm, you have a hurricane, and you have opportunity. And the opportunity wind, the name of that wind, was the wind, its definition is the wind that will take you back to your harbor, who will take you home. So when the Romans were out on their huge ships and there was no wind and they were been gone for months and they were homesick and they want to get home, and suddenly they feel like we're going to die here, and suddenly this wind comes. Opportunity, the right wind, will bring you home. But it shows you two things. First of all, it shows you that just because an opportunity comes doesn't mean you will come home to your harbor. You still have to hoist the sails. You still have to navigate and take the rudder. You still need to do something. It also shows you that when that wind comes, that's when you have to do it. And I do the analogy of an elevator. Most people would just walk and say, oh, grinding. I hate the word grinding. Hustle. I hate the word hustle. Like, oh, you need to hustle and grind. They're walking up the stairs, 70 floors. I just stand at the bottom. I wait for the elevator, and there comes the elevator. I'm just standing here with you having a coffee. Now the elevator doors open. Now what do you need to do? You need to stop talking. You need to jump into the elevator, and you need to press the button and go as high as you can. 25 floors. Now the doors open. Jump out. Now rest. Have a coffee, talk, wait. The new elevator comes, jump in, go higher. So the ability to identify and react on an opportunity, if you ask me, the most important skill that the most important aspect of self-leadership is to practice the ability to grasp opportunities.
Yeah, that's the take action piece.
Yes.
Once you've aligned your thinking, feeling, then you take action towards the objective.
Which goes back to the lion.
Yeah.
Sit and wait, and then okay, that's the guy. That's the little zebra kid. I'm gonna go after him and run like crazy, grab him, and you have food for a week.
I've got another metaphor analogy for you, because I'm an ex-surfer, and that's why I moved from England to Australia. And what surfers know is where the rips are.
Yeah.
Now swimmers have to be terrified of rips because they'll take you out to sea, but a surfer wants the rip because they jump on their surfboard. You get a rip that takes you out, and you jump on. You don't have to paddle too hard. Zips you out. Then you jump off that rip, and then you're in the surf break.
And the other way around, you need to see that the wave is coming.
Yes.
You need to see that the opportunity is coming, and you need to start paddling before the wave is there,
Yep.
so that you have the speed to you can jump to, you can ride a wave. And most people, they go, oh, the wave is here, and then you get crashed by the wave, and they miss the opportunity.
Absolutely. Oh well, we're living in metaphor land today.
Yeah. But it's important, because if you look at, most people don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, but a good metaphor outframes a current reality. You know, you need to find meaning in a scenario or situation. Often people take those metaphors, you know, they're prescribed for them in some book or text, and they say, well, this is what this means. But when you find your own meaning for your life, is much more significant, much more important, much less of a...
And I can look at of all the success, whatever has created success in my life, it's when I have grasped an opportunity.
Very good. So, key to success, you know, being aware of what the right kind of opportunity is for you, grasping it. So that brings us nicely around the circle of the self-leadership model to the self-learning piece, right? So, you know, we have self-awareness, we've self-regulated, but we're always on this continual learning, the ability to take feedback, adjust that feedback, move forwards. Can you remember a time where, you know, you got the feedback that this wasn't working? To your metaphor of knocking on the door or banging on the door, you know, a self-learning piece. This isn't working for me. I need to make a change.
Okay, so in 2005, I was speaker of the year in Sweden. I was one of the most booked speakers. I was I did 199 speeches in Sweden in 1 year.
Wow.
I was very successful. And I said to myself, this is too easy. Basically, when everyone else thinks you've made it, but you know that you're just getting started, I said, you know, I'm done with Sweden, now let's do it on a global scale. So in 2005, I moved to China. And I started from scratch, literally from scratch. No contacts, no leads, no friends, no family, nothing. Just me, 2 suitcases, and an empty apartment in Beijing. And I started to build a speaking career from scratch. And I did that to challenge myself, to start over, to get a new challenge. And then in 2008, so then I said, I'm going to live the rest of my life in China. I'm going to be riding the speaker wave of China. For 2 years I did that, and then I realized, no, the insight was right. I need to leave Sweden, but the conclusion, you need to move to China, was wrong. So after 2 years, I said, I'm going to live in China for the rest of my life. But after 2 years, I said, no, this is wrong. I should have moved. I didn't want to become a speaker in China. I wanted to become a global speaker. And when I lived in China, because so much things were happening in China, you get absorbed. It's like a magnet. You get sucked into China, especially in Beijing. So I need to leave China. I need to move somewhere else. So for 9 months, I did not have a home. I just traveled from speech to speech, and every time I had some time left over, I would spend 2 weeks in a city. So like 2 weeks in Seoul, 2 weeks in Shanghai, 2 weeks in Bangkok, 2 weeks in Singapore, 2 weeks in KL, because I wanted to see which of these cities do I want to spend the rest of my life in, and not just take one and live in it for 2 weeks to really evaluate how is Seoul to live in. And after done that, during those 9 months, I said, okay, plus and minuses, Singapore. So when I moved to Singapore, I knew I have done my due diligence. This is where I want to spend the rest of my life. It's the most global place on earth. It's a very multinational cultural place. There are great connections. It's easy to have a global mindset here. And that's when I realized moving to China was the wrong decision. And then not totally changed my plan, but recalibrate the plan. Right? China was kind of right, but still 100% wrong. And then Singapore suddenly felt, yeah, this is the place. And now I feel like this is where I will live for the rest of my life.
Well, this is why I wanted to interview you, because most people would not have the courage to take that level of learning on board, right? I mean, there's a certain time in your life, right? I mean, I remember, you know, packing up and moving to Australia, you know, selling everything I owned, which really was just a record collection and a bicycle. But you know, but if you're watching this, you got wife and children, and you know, it's a lot harder to do that. So, but most people have these defense mechanisms that you know, once they've invested in something, all right, when they can't take it back, right? And it's like buying a stock that's gone down. People can't take the loss and move on,
right?
All right, or if the stock's gone up, of course, then they don't want to sell it because it's already gone up.
Yeah.
Your stock had gone up, and you went, you know what? I'm selling that, and I'm moving on.
Yes.
That is a powerful self-challenge.
Yes, but a lot of people say, "Oh, that was very brave of you," or that was such a big thing. But for me, it wasn't. It wasn't, because it felt right to do that, and I saw an opportunity and I grasped it. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate things and say, "Oh, it must be so difficult to move to China," or a lot of things that people say, this must be so difficult. Most of those things are actually much less difficult than you think. I think people overcomplicate things to come up with a reason for why they don't have to do it.
Okay. So, what would you?
It's kind of like we say that you don't regret the things you do, you regret the things you didn't do.
Yep.
And I think it's the same, that you complicate the things that you don't do much more than the things that you actually do. You come up with all this reason for why writing a book, driving across the Americas, running a marathon, whatever it is, go to the base camp of Mount Everest, anything. You say, "Oh, that's so complicated to do." And then when you decide to do something, you go, "Actually, what do I need to do to do this?" And then you just make it into small steps and you do it. So everyone knows that when we decide to do something, it becomes much less complicated than when we're coming up with all the reasons why we can't do something.
Yeah, I have a self-leadership perspective on this one, of course, and that is, and since you like epistemology, entomology, the search for truth of meaning is the word decision, because you made a decision, and the word decision, like the word incision, right? When a surgeon makes an incision, they're cutting into the body. When we make a decision, we cut apart. We say yes to what we want,
yes,
and no to all the other stuff.
Right.
So what you were as a self-leader at that point is decisive, because those people that are complicating things are saying yes to both things,
yes,
or they're saying maybe to a lot of things.
Yes, I think
right?
That's the one.
They're saying maybe this, maybe that, maybe
yes,
that, and that's where the procrastination.
Yes.
But the moment you actually, choose your path, say yes to this, then you say no to everything
yes,
else. You say yes, I want to get this university degree. You have to say no to going and getting a job for a
yes,
period of time,
right,
or no to all the parties. You can go to some of the parties, but not all the parties,
yes,
right? So what
right,
I find is the muscle of decision making, and what you're clearly articulating in your self-leadership is, I make a decision. I make, you said I made the decision to go and focus on Speakers Bureau. I made the decision to go to China,
yeah,
which meant you clearly were able to say no to a whole bunch of other things at that time.
right, yes. And I also believe a lot of setting aside a lot of time to actually reflect about the things that you are. Because if you're going to make a decision, you should first reflect and get all the information needed. And today, a lot of people, we don't think we have time. So we don't take this time to reflect.
Yep.
And then we make decisions that are hasty decisions. And hasty decisions are normally not right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said, 2 months per year, I sit on an island and I just don't do anything, because I need 2 months off to just think, what am I going to do the next year?
Yep.
And have a lot of time to just reflect, subconsciously think about all the different aspects, throw around hundreds of different ideas for decisions, and let them grow inside of me until I know, you know what, this is the one. Back to the hunting again. Think, which one should I take? Which one should I take? Which one should I take? That's the one. Now you take it. Now you go after that one, and you ignore all the other animals. You just go after that one. But if the tiger would go, or the lion would go out and say, okay, let's hunt. Okay, let's take that one. And you go, no, that might be the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So you talk about self-leadership, self-reflection.
Yeah.
If I would sell anything, I would sell self-reflection. The time to take time to think about the decision you are going to make.
I think that's your takeaway. I think that's the closing line. And for the people that have chosen to listen to you today, they've taken the time out. Hopefully, you will now book some time to reflect on this and think about what it is that you want to hunt. I think you've shared so many nuggets in this session. I'm going to look forward to reviewing this, deconstructing, writing up the notes for this, because thank you, Fredrik. That was absolute gold.
Thank you very much. Now go hunt.
Go hunt.